When we look at the multiple cloud platforms that a lot of organizations have implemented, they can often be disjointed and siloed with different teams, different protocols, different ways of working. And that creates a lot of friction in the system as a whole across the entire organization. So the different parts that need to function can't function as well as they can. And of course, inefficiency is a way of increasing cost. And that's definitely one area of which the cloud and the hybrid cloud platforms that are in organizations at the moment are increasing the cost, and they're not optimized in any particular way at all. And certainly from a strategic planning point of view for interoperability, we need to look back at what we're actually trying to achieve with those different platforms. Now, we might have different platforms for different reasons. We might still have on-prem because we have to, but all of these things need to work together. And one of the ways of doing this is to essentially have solutions that bridge the gaps between them, that allow the different platforms, the different cloud platforms, on-prem solutions to all be able to talk together in a more cohesive way, to be able to operate together in a much more cohesive way, and therefore increase the efficiency at which they run at, which will, of course, decrease the cost of running them and optimize those. So we get into a position where we kind of need this clear path and plan to actually get us there. And one of the ways that we can do that is by standardizing and centralizing the automation strategy across all of those platforms as part of that plan. And one of the big pluses of doing that is that we move from a space where we have multiple native cloud platforms and teams. We have different people operating within those areas that we have to traverse and cross against. And we can actually have one platform that does that across all of the different clouds, and it does it across on-premise, and it also does it on our SaaS platforms as well. So we can have a much more streamlined process when we need things to happen in the various systems, and it doesn't matter where they are at that point, because we're able to draw into the cloud and run those native automations from a central place. And we can do that across the different cloud platforms. We can do it on premise, and we can do it in the SaaS platforms that we have. And that's really key, because then those teams that are trying to run the different operations that they have can do it in a much more efficient and effective way, therefore reducing cost and taking up a lot less resource as well. Because obviously at the moment, if you imagine you have a situation where a team needs something to be actioned in the cloud, they have to wait for that cloud team to get back to them, run those native automations, and then they have a backlog of work they're doing. They potentially have a already existing list of actions they need to undertake, and they're having to wait for them. So that you're creating again a kind of blocker that doesn't really need to be there. But by using a single platform that can reach into the cloud regardless, you're removing that blocker, you're removing those delays, and you're enabling those teams to be able to be self-sufficient to some degree by extending the ability to reach into the cloud and do the things that they need to do. And that really is key to driving down the costs of the automation platforms that exist in the cloud, and separately on-premise as well, by bringing them all together. We can also talk to essentially around the sort of ownership as well, in terms of who owns these various parts, who is running these various parts, and where can these costs come from that are in our hybrid cloud or platforms, because they tend to be different disparate teams, and they tend to be all following their own processes and procedures. And by bringing in one singular platform, it's much easier to standardize against all of those. It's much easier to easily see the ownership and where we can go to have certain things actioned, and also to optimize again the resources that are involved in those. And we can also make it a lot easier to scale up and down resources that we're using in the cloud itself as well, because we're able to centrally do this. So we can have our data scientists, for example, initiate self-service requests from within their on-premise platform that they could request that from. That can then reach out into the cloud. It can spin up the various components they need, and it can then shut them back down again afterwards. And it can do this all seamlessly. Whereas to do that the current situation in a lot of organizations, we're actually talking about talking to people. So we're raising tickets, we're communicating with different teams, we're asking for putting requests through to be made, for things to be stood up and stood down. And of course, all of that is taking time. And inevitably, of course, this can lead to bad behaviors because people don't stand things down because it takes them a while to actually get the requests run through. So they just leave them up and running because they need them potentially tomorrow. Whereas if we can streamline all of that, make it easier, people are much more likely to follow that. But on top of that, we can obviously put that discipline and that automation over the top so that they don't have to worry about it. It's just happening in the background, and it's all interconnected, and it's made very easy. And if things are easy, people tend to do them.